At the brink of the universe, scientists have ventured into uncharted territory, catching everyone off guard with an unforeseen revelation. The narrative unfolds within the confines of a spaceship laboratory. Suddenly, an alarm blares, triggering the activation of fire suppression systems. The air is filled with the heated exchange of words between two men. One asserts that his companion has gone insane, escalating the confrontation into a physical altercation. In the midst of the scuffle, one of them seizes a pair of pliers, employing them to intimidate the other. Outside the confines of the spaceship, we catch a glimpse of the peculiar craft, a rounded vessel emanating a brilliant light. Meanwhile, on a distinctive ship, a timekeeping device reads 6. Harold Richards, the lieutenant colonel tasked with piloting the spacecraft, stirs, rolls out of bed, and begins his routine push-ups before hopping on an exercise bike. His collaborator, Dr. Abe Anderson, prefers additional rest, but rises grudgingly to brew some coffee, indulging by spiking it with a splash of alcohol. After his fitness regime, Harold transitions to the lab, recording data onto a logbook while scrutinizing a glass cylinder filled with bees. He tends to their aquatic pet, an electric eel residing in an onboard aquarium. Concluding his tasks, he scans the surrounding void with a periscope, yet sees only vast darkness. Their spaceship shares similarities with the previous one, rounded, with one side absorbing light and the other emitting a smoke-like substance. Harold maintains diligence in his duties while his partner, Abe, lazes around, enjoying a drink, trying on sunglasses, and catching up on the screen. Post-completion of his responsibilities, Harold brews some coffee and flops onto a cluttered sofa littered with alcohol sachets. He discloses to Anderson that they are nearing their target. Contrarily, Abe speculates the destination to be even further away, deeming the entire mission futile. Harold, without a word, exits the room. The following morning, Harold resumes his exercise and lab activities, including updating the data on the bees. Abe, meanwhile, continues his slumber. During his feeding routine with the eel, Harold loses his pen in the water. Unwittingly, the military tags around his neck also plunges into the aquarium, connecting with the eel's shock, leading to Harold's electrocution. The man falls, and the spaceship loses power for a few seconds. Abe rouses himself and goes to seek Harold. Upon exiting the room, he instantly spots his partner's lifeless body. Overwhelmed by shock, Abe covers Harold with a bag and drags him across the spacecraft. When he opens the airlock, he hesitates to release his partner's body into the vastness of space. Finding himself at the control deck, he attempts to make sense of the diverse control interfaces. He asks the onboard computer their distance from Earth and the universe's edge. But the computer cannot compute the information. Despite this, the spacecraft continues into the mystery of the deep, dark space. Abe steps out of the pilot cabin, waking up near the airlock module where he had evidently dozed off, missing his deceased companion. As he picks himself up, he unintentionally activates the lever, and the spacecraft ejects Harold's body into the void. In a state of panic, Abe rushes to the periscope, where his fears are confirmed. Harold's body is spiraling away into oblivion. Now, the perplexed Abe has no choice but to continue the journey solo. He drifts off to sleep, with a storm raging around the spacecraft. Bolts of lightning wake Abe from his sleep. Terrified, he approaches the windows and is frozen in terror at a tremendous electric stingray wrapped around the spacecraft. The startled man gulps down another packet of alcohol and falls asleep on the floor. Once he sobers up, he re-watches video footage of him and Harold in the middle of their expedition. During the footage, Abe tells the reporter that one of their secondary objectives was to observe the impact of zero gravity on honeybees, but the project lacked conclusive data because the insects didn't survive for long. Harold interjects that they also had a pinball machine, but it malfunctioned. Proceeding with the interview, the journalist asks about their main objective. Will they reach the universe's end soon? Abe's response is uncertain, stating that it could take a while before they get there, but he's convinced that they would know when they arrived when they no longer see the stars. The broadcast concludes, and Abe fabricates a hangman's knot from wires. Slipping it over his head, he retrieves a photograph of his wife and mentally bids her farewell. Without warning, the vessel is shaken by an unexpected force. Abe is thrown off his footing and staggers helplessly. Abe advances to the viewing pod, mesmerized by the stark luminescence outside. The man dons his spectacles, eagerly attempting to discern the exterior. The narrative shifts back 13 years where Dr. Weatherford was addressing a scientific gathering. She shares about the future space exploration mission and delves into theoretical calculations. From amongst the listeners, she calls forth Abe, introducing him to her peers as an eminent marine biologist. With great joy, the doctor expresses her anticipation to practically investigate their hypothetical assertions, thanks to Anderson. One of the scientists in the crowd voices his skepticism about the mission and advises further investigation of their theories. Dr. Weatherford, in response, validates the risk involved. From the audience, she then invites Harold, the chosen module pilot, to join them. The doctor is optimistic about the fruitful culmination of their quest. An exchange of handshake between Harold and Abe is captured by the media present. Subsequently, we follow Abe through the preparation phase for his cosmic adventure. As a part of the procedure, Abe undergoes scrutiny, is interrogated, and read his rights. Dr. Weatherford, manifesting her deep interest in the multiverse theory, contemplates her calculations and posits the universe to be more intricate than conventional understanding. She advocates the necessity of respecting the enigmatic character of the cosmos. Yet the concept of reaching its limit seems fantastical. It defies imagination. Abe seems disoriented and suddenly faints. The medical team springs into action to revive him, asking him to sign a few documents. The doctor advises taking into account the scientist's low stress threshold. After training, Harold returns. He encourages Abe and helps him to his feet. Dr. Weatherford is filled with excitement about the future astronauts, but abruptly Abe faints again. The plot transitions back to the spaceship mid-voyage during Harold's lifetime. He identifies an issue with the airlock and attempts to rectify the system. Unfortunately, the automated waste disposal malfunctions, forcing them to resort to manual operation. Harold cautions Abe of the impending monotony, to which Abe responds with a laugh while inspecting the lever. Despite the circumstance, both team members maintain their spirit and relish their time aboard the vessel. Anderson cooperatively collaborates with Richards in dealing with the bees until he notices Harold, in contravention to standard procedures, is the one feeding the eels sardines. Anderson alerts him of the inherent peril of such action, but Harold dismisses him, immersed in the experience. Come evening, Anderson sketches something in his journal, and then scopes a galaxy through the periscope. Seizing an opportunity when Harold is preoccupied, Abe hastily retrieves a case full of provisions from which sardines come tumbling out. Swiftly stashing the case into the airlock, he jettisons it into the vastness of space, preventing Harold from further risking his safety by feeding the eel. Satisfied, he heads over to Harold's command pod. While Harold operates the vessel by pressing several buttons, Abe inquires about the necessity of such action, seeing as the spacecraft is essentially operating on autopilot. Suddenly, a red button on the console starts blinking. Harold attempts to press it, but is restrained by Abe, who wishes to investigate the consequences of taking no immediate action. Harold is irked by his partner's interference and lashes out, striking Abe in the face. To Harold's surprise, Abe merely laughs off the punch, and the ship continues to operate normally without the button being pressed, leading Harold to reconsider the significance of his task. As Abe departs, Harold prompts the computer to clarify whether the buttons he was pressing were indeed necessary. The subsequent day, Harold questions Abe about the whereabouts of the sardines. Anderson smugly reveals that he has jettisoned them into outer space. Harold is infuriated and retaliates, but Abe casually points out that he had already attacked him earlier. Agitated, Richard seizes a photo of Anderson's spouse and tears it apart. Abe stares at the ripped photo when suddenly an unusual sound from another part of the ship grabs his attention. He follows the sound, leading him to a chamber brimming with people. It is the people who greet the two teammates at the beginning of the movie when they are sent to the borders of the universe. The astronauts thank those present and propose a toast to space. That's how Abe drinks a small pouch of alcohol for the first time, and soon starts drinking more and more of it. We're taken further back time-wise to yet another day. Abe begins his day at the laboratory. His task leads him to scrutinize a collection of deceased bees. A thorough view through the microscope reveals an unspecified cause of death for one of them. He returns to a room bordered with windows that offer a panoramic view of the starry universe. The cycle of mourning arrives again, following the exact traditions of years gone by. Stretching out on the couch, Abe succumbs to sleep. Harold observes a malfunction in the automated machinery feeding the eel and locates his teammate throughout the spacecraft, only to discover him asleep near the windowed space, where the stars are still in view. Abe voices his despair at his lack of accomplishments for the day. Harold assures him that everyone requires a period of rest. The following day sees Abe intent on repairing the arcade machine, an endeavor proving unsuccessful due to a sudden short circuit. Concurrently, Harold takes out a tin of sardines to personally feed the eel. In the evening, Richards asks Abe if the machine fix was successful. Abe responds negatively, but mentions that he fashioned a necklace and bracelets from the wires. Harold tells his colleague not to do foolish things. Amidst admiring his homemade jewels, a photograph of Abe's wife slips out of his locker, a sight that brings him immense joy, as he thought it to be lost. Scene again shifts back in time to another day on the spacecraft. With renewed enthusiasm, Harold inquires about Abe's planned activities for the day. Abe responds hands-on work with bees is scheduled as the hive is now ready for harvest. Harold's interest peaks at this and expresses his affinity for cosmic honey. Anderson makes his way to the lab to find the bees, still buzzing with life. He keeps an account in the observation logs and regulates the gas supply to the hive. Upon completing their tasks, Abe ventures to the room adorned with windows. The outer view from their spacecraft is transformed, basking in an orange glow. Clearly, their adventure has just lifted off as the sun remains visible to the astronauts. Captivated, Abe retrieves a picture of his beloved spouse and places it against the window, watching it with affection. Harold and Abe come together where they share their thoughts with glee. The spacecraft continues its flight, and the sound of bees buzzing can still be heard. It is believed that space honey will be available for collection as early as tomorrow, Abe announces. They both make their way to the control cabin. It's Abe's first foray into the command hub. He surveys the space and asks Harold whether he is familiar with the operational intricacies. Richards responds with assurance, equating the task of navigating the spacecraft to the simple management of a jet ski. Only it happens in space. Suddenly, an event occurs within the ship. Come night, Harold is engrossed in a game on a still-functional console. He's striving to beat the existing high score, however, Abe's distraction halts the game prematurely. Concurrently, their spaceship nears an enormous object exuding an orange radiance. The dawn of a new day brings new tasks. Abe readies himself to harvest some space honey, whilst Harold searches for bread in the storage area. Puzzling flashes of light continue to emanate around their vessel. Abe returns to the window-filled room and surprise meets him in the form of Harold, who typically prefers to stay away from the space. Shrouded in puzzlement, Harold wonders what the attraction of the room is for Abe. In response, Anderson articulates his love for stargazing, considering it aesthetically pleasing. A somber Harold admits that his wife is even more beautiful. Abe becomes intrigued as to why Harold chose to undertake the mission, leaving his spouse behind. Initially, Harold says his choice was influenced by a call from his nation, but later concedes that significant tax reductions for his family was the primary motive for his decision. Abe, on the other hand, attributes his decision to answer the call of science. What awaits them on their journey remains uncertain, but from their understanding, it is apparent there are more things left to discover than initially perceived. They ponder over the possibilities of an alternate reality or an entirely different universe lurking out there. By this time, Abe is keeping himself engaged by striving to achieve high scores on the game console. Harold reappears, this time carrying bread, and reminds his colleague about the space honey. Sampling the cosmic honey, they find themselves caught up in conversations about family and what led them to undertake the voyage. Harold captures an image of Abe's wife, musing aloud over why Abe would leave such a woman behind. With remorse, Anderson expresses that it was his wife's departure that propelled him to seek solace amongst the stars, rather than any scientific endeavors. Abe once more finds his attention overtaken by the gaming machine. Suddenly, it emits peculiar sounds indicating its malfunction. Concurrently, the spacecraft alarm rings. A notification from the system reveals a rapid decrease in the insect count within their onboard lab. Life has fled the bees, leaving their bodies to drop to the base of the hive. Across the long night plagued by insomnia, Abe's thoughts are of his wife. Shifting onto his side, he is momentarily aware of two fellow astronauts sharing a table nearby. "Come morning." Harold stumbles upon Abe's sketchbook, filled with drawings of Harold himself. Confused, Harold questions Abe about the sketches, to which Abe affirms that they depict Harold still alive. Seeing this as a positive omen, Anderson expresses his delight. But Richards is left puzzled by his use of the word yet. Abe defers a full explanation for later. Suddenly, Harold becomes hostile towards Abe, accusing him of harboring harmful intentions. Armed with a pair of pliers, Richards gesticulates menacingly at Anderson, demanding he spill the truth about the persisting portrayals of his body. Calmly, Abe discloses he started producing the sketches after an accident had occurred. It was his way of capturing his recollections. Harold's growing suspicion makes him question Abe's sanity, but Anderson traces everything back to the death of the bees. Starting with sketching the bees and eventually their deaths, Anderson made sequential sketches which included bodies. Having seen depictions of him undergoing electrocution by an eel, Harold's shock is evident. We witness this scene repeatedly across different realities, alongside Abe. Abe also struggles to provide an explanation, trying to recall the event and its timing through sketching. Ultimately, Abe believes that they aren't the only ones affected by such peculiar occurrences. This is evidenced by the presence of an additional pair of astronauts sharing the same concerns within the room Abe and Harold occupy. Richard can't get over the idea that the eel will be the cause of his demise. He still can't understand how Abe is aware of it. Anderson himself doesn't know what's happening to him. He shows his companion other drawings, including white cracks in the darkness. Meanwhile, Harold, trying to figure out exactly how the eel could fatally harm him, plunges his hand into the aquarium and receives an electric shock. Abe retrieves a bag, but suddenly looks again at his drawing with the crack. Suddenly, he rushes towards the porthole to see what's outside, but only sees darkness. The man rushes towards a bundle of wires and tries to tear them, but realizes that Harold has taken the pliers. He returns to his companion, turns the body, and sees the pliers protruding from the chest. Abe takes the tool, goes back to the wires, and cuts one. Hearing a strange sound, he pulls the entire bundle towards him. The wires start to sparkle and the ship trembles. Abe runs to the porthole and watches as the ship veers off course and crashes into the darkness like a wall. The darkness begins to crack and soon shatters into shards. The darkness is replaced by a bright, blinding light. Suddenly, we see Abe at home. He takes the remote control and turns off the television, saying he has already seen all of this. He goes into the garden and meets his wife. Suddenly, a phone rings in the house. Abe returns to answer it. Dr. Weatherford informs Anderson that the position he applied for has already been assigned. Confused, Abe picks up a newspaper with a photo of 2 other astronauts. The story returns to the spaceship where the other astronauts are traveling. They are in big trouble. One of the men is trying to fix a malfunction in the system and cuts the wrong wire. The spaceship crashes and is swallowed by the darkness. What do you think happened on the ship? Could everything that happened be just Abe's imagination? Or have the protagonists discovered the multiverse? Share your theories in the comments, give us a like, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.